Good afternoon. I'm Katherine Johnson, and I'm talking today with some of my colleagues about the subject of reading and the importance of reading in college, which is pretty huge, actually. I have with me Christine Wilson and Carrie Schwab, both in the Developmental Education Department. And today I just want us to talk about what we know about reading, what we've learned about reading, what's important for college students to know and be aware of. And I think I'm going to start with my biggest reading challenge as a college student. And here it is. It's the Riverside Shakespeare. It weighs about 40 pounds. No, not really, but it is really thick, as you can see. And when I was a junior in college, my first time living away from home on the Seattle Pacific University campus, I had this class and 4 others, and I was just buried in reading because we read one play about every 2 or 3 days. Oh, and I'm going to have you get a close-up of how small this print is. Anyway. And my basic problem was I didn't have enough time to read. I hadn't allowed myself enough time because I was taking too many classes, and I had an internship that quarter, and I had choir. So my only time for reading was after dinner, and I was up till midnight every night, and I thought, wow, I could flunk one of these classes. I didn't, but I did end up getting a B in Shakespeare, and I was so excited to get a B because I knew I had learned a lot, and I still really liked Shakespeare, but that was the best I could do under that circumstance. And so what I learned was you should plan your schedule when you've got a reading intensive course like this so that you have enough time to read, particularly if you're not a very fast reader, which I'm not. I tend to remember really well, but I don't read very quickly. So that's my main cautionary tale, I guess, or learning experience from reading in college. Carrie, you teach a textbook class even.
I do. I teach
textbook
a
reading.
class.
So how would you have told me to read the Riverside Shakespeare?
And I have a similar book.
Yeah.
It's still in my
English
office at
majors
home.
have
It's
one of
red.
Yeah. They make really good booster chairs.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've
I've
probably used it for a lot of those sorts of things. But I teach a class just on textbook reading, specifically content area textbooks like biology, psychology, and the like, not so much to Shakespeare.
Okay.
And I guess one of the things that I hear from students over and over again when they first take the class, I ask them what their reading challenges are. And they say, you know what, my biggest problem is when I read textbook material, I have to read it more than once. That's my biggest problem, is I have to read it more than once. And what I tell them is, probably you should read it more than once if you really are going to understand it. I think there's a myth, again, talked about myths in different module. There's a myth that smart people, college students, can read things and recall them instantly. And you should be reading your textbooks more than once, and you read it for different purposes. You may be reading once to get, and every student is different in how they like to do this, but you may be reading it once to just get an overview. And then the second time you read it, you may be looking for specific things, skimming and scanning types of things. You may read it once to get, if you have a tough vocabulary in your textbook, you may be reading it once just to get those vocabulary words out, get them on note cards and put them aside, and then read it again for meaning. And I think that's one of the biggest things I hear from college students. Well, I'm not a good reader because I have to read things more than once. Join the club. Most of us do. And if someone says they don't, they probably have other issues, okay, with other things, like, just remembering it, or, they might have other things going on. So I really think that would be the one main thing. And I think the other thing is that I really believe you can make textbook reading interesting.
Really?
I do really believe that you can make textbook reading interesting.
Oh, come on. Some of them are like the best sleep aid I know. So
well, don't read before bed. But I do think there are ways to have students, what we would say, engage with the text through teaching them how to make different sorts of study guides, to teach them how to, I really think students can teach themselves even how to become more interested in the material they're learning.
I have heard students say many times, well, you know, if it's a subject that I'm not really interested in, and let's say I have to read, we know our nursing students and many other students have to read 100 pages a night easily, maybe more. How do I remember, or how do I remember the important stuff, or how do I even know what the important stuff is if I'm just reading all these pages to get through the pages? And that's what I hear from students. And don't you think it would be a fabulous idea for every student to take a study skills class?
I do.
Where they teach you how to not only study from that textbook, but how to make sense of that material and how to look for the bolded print and you know, how to take notes from that material and all that. I never got a class like that when I was in college, and somehow I muddled through, but it would have been a whole lot easier had I known those techniques, and I like to read.
I agree, and I believe too that one thing students will say when they have to read something twice is they are pulling out the important information maybe the first or second time, but they don't like the time that they have to spend doing that. That takes up too much time. It's so time consuming. I don't have time. But do you have time to take the class over? You have time to, you know. So you may not have time, if you don't have time to study, Catherine mentioned earlier about putting your time out, but think about that, you know, and change that. And I think now too, a lot of textbooks do come with really nice questions at the beginning of the chapter, questions at the end of the chapter, sidebars, information on the sidebars, information and captions and other pictures. There are lots of places where you can pull out that information. If it's under the picture, caption under the picture, and it's on the sidebar, and it's bold print headed in the text, and there's a question about it at the end of the text, I bet you it's important information. And I struggled with that too as a college student. I came in college thinking I was a great reader. I started reading when I was 4 years old, you know, fast reader, you know, pretty good reading comprehension. I got those textbooks and I thought, who wrote this? You know, this is so boring and uninteresting, and I'm sure that I can just read it once. I'm a great reader. I can read it once and I can get all that information. When I started getting C's in biology, basic biology class, I thought, oh, something is wrong here. And that's what I had to do, start looking at the important things. No, what is important? There's a lot of different ways to look at that, but.
I hear students talk about a couple of things that frustrates them about textbooks. One is the instructor made me buy this expensive book and we never use it. That's one issue. And the other is, I hear students say, but I just don't read books at all. And I especially want you to talk about that. But you know, with that issue of teachers who don't use the textbook or don't appear to use the textbook, what would you say to that?
Well, they may not appear to use it, but they are using it, and you just don't realize it. They probably, in a class, it's a 5-credit class that meets 4 days a week, they probably can't get all the information to you. They're expecting you to supplement it with the textbook. I had one student in a DEVED 105 class tell me once that they believed that your textbook is your second instructor. That when you pay for a class, that you are paying one fee for the class, credit-wise, and you're paying another fee for the book, because we have books on this campus that are $300.
Yeah, which is getting close to the tuition.
It's getting close to at least 1 or 2, you know, couple credits of the class, and as soon as I tell the students that, they're like, whoa, think about this. You can ask that book questions, and it will answer them, right? Just like an instructor. It's a little bit different way, but you can ask the textbook questions, and it will give you an answer. You have to figure out a way to ask those questions, and that comes in study skills classes and types of classes I teach, or maybe you can dig something out of a success class you took before, but if you ask the textbook question, it will give you information. If you spend as much time or more with the textbook as you do in class, you will get something out of it. Right?
I really wish I had done that and known that as a young, very young community college student, where I had a history class where the teacher did not lecture well at all, let's just say. I'll talk more about that in another video. But You know, if I had just read the textbook, I would have learned a lot about that period of history. But because he didn't assign any textbook reading, I thought, oh, well, you know, here I'm carrying this book around, what should I do with it? I should have just read it on my own, and I really would have gotten a lot more out of the class.
And you should have read, I didn't know this either, read the section, the chapter of the week or the topic for the week ahead of the time, before class. And I'll just jump in here because I've taught my college level reading class multiple times with psychology. And psychology is a difficult subject, lots of terminology, lots of concepts that are brand new to everyone. And the instructor would simply assign a chapter a week. He didn't talk about it, he just said, next week we're on chapter blah, blah, blah. And the students who excelled in that class were the students who read that ahead of time and walked in the door with questions. Because he viewed his lecture as supplement to the textbook. Wow. He expected them to read it. He wanted to add to that. But a lot of students didn't understand that, and they wanted him to spoon feed what was in that chapter, and he never did. So test day, which was almost every week, was about everything in that chapter that he thought was important. So yeah, read the textbook ahead of time and walk in with questions, the things you don't know.
And I said that the textbook was your second instructor, but in some cases it's the first.
In his class it was number one.
Yeah, in some classes it's number one.
Let's switch over to talking about the love of reading, which
Love
we
of
all
reading.
have, and we would want our students to have, and they oftentimes lose it from having to read so much in college. But do we have any ideas for how to help people love reading again? Or
well, I'll
for the
start
first
on
time?
that since I started the reading department here at Everett Community College. We have many students who have really never read a book from cover to cover by choice. They have been assigned books in high school or different parts of their life and had to read something. But they'll claim they don't like reading, but the truth is they've really never read anything they liked. And so my first piece of advice is always hang with me. By the end of this quarter, you will have another kind of appreciation for reading. And my advice is to pick anything that you like. It could be, you know, sports, or it could be science fiction or romance, or any kind of thing like that that you think you like. Murder mystery is always a good one, because they always grab you at the beginning and pull you through. But you go, okay, well, I kind of like that. Find a book, any book, bestseller list, what, it doesn't really matter. The point is that you actually read it, and read it from the beginning to the end. You don't have to if you don't like it. It's okay to put it down and get another one. But the idea is to find something that you like to read, because the truth is the more you read, the better reader you become. And the brain takes in so much that you're not aware of because you're involved in the story. You will develop vocabulary that you didn't think about along the way because it's there. You will also see, and hopefully it's a book that's well written, you'll see how people write in a better way than in comic books or the TV guide. You know, it actually elevates your writing along the way, it elevates your vocabulary, not only your spoken vocabulary, but your written vocabulary. So it gives you so much more than you think. And you know, you can travel to foreign lands, you can travel to the future or to the past, you can learn about a culture that you have never been to. I mean, the avenues are so wide and vast that it really is, it's an adventure that never ends. And in our classes, in our reading classes, we have students read usually 2 books, a fiction, a story that someone makes up, and a nonfiction, something that's true. And most students feel like they love reading when they're done, because it's an experience they've never had. So take a reading class. I don't care if they say you don't have to, or if you walk in the door and they say, oh, look, your reading score is just fine, you don't need a reading class, take one anyway. Because you will develop into a much higher level student than you would have otherwise.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks, Dale.